Hey everyone, welcome back to Tea with Mesha.
Welcome back to Tea with Mesha.
Welcome back to Tea with Mesha. Hey y'all, welcome back to Tea with Mesha. We're back with some more hot tea. I got some raspberry tea that my homegirl Lee brought for our Kingdom Sisters lock-in or whatever. And this is some raspberry tea, and she brought some tangerine tea. It was really good. But raspberry tea is really good for menstrual cramps and like pregnancy support. So I added me a little lemon juice and a little agave. And let me tell you something. This is good stuff. This is good stuff. So get y'all some of this for real. I said that about all the teas. Just go to the store and just fill up your cart with all the tea. So today, though, I do want to talk about something that is another thing I've been working on for the past few months. But this week, it has been coming up back to back to back to back to back. And I think that it's very essential that we learn it so that we can obey God. And the topic is compassion and grace, right? So one thing I've been trying to work on personally is to give as much grace as I can to people all ages, no matter where you're from, who you are, no matter what. Give as much grace as I can, because I understand now that I need as much grace as I can get. And I know that God gives us refresh grace daily, new graces and mercies every single day. And I'm very appreciative of that grace. It's not to say that his grace isn't sufficient enough, but because we live on this earth and we interact with so many different people, I give as much grace as I can because I know that I need as much grace as I can get. One thing that happened recently actually was my friend. We were on the phone and she was like, you know what, I was just thinking about you being bossy, and then you called me being even more bossy. You changed the time again. And it was funny to me because when I told my mom, I was like, my friend just said I was bossy. And she was like, yeah, you can be bossy. And although it wasn't necessarily surprising, what surprised me is how funny it was to them. And just hearing them talk about it was like, this girl, yeah, you can be bossy. It was so interesting because it was like they give me grace. Like they don't see my bossiness as like control or like overbearing. It was more so like, it's just her. But one of my other friends gave perspective and was like, yeah, I mean, you're just a planner and you need stuff to go a certain way. So it's not necessarily you're just like bossy and rude like a mean girl, but you're just on time. Like that's just the kind of person you are. And so I was like, I thank God that it was told to me so that I can be aware of it and so I don't come off as bossy. You know, all the times, especially for people who don't know me, I want to be able to still like get to the tea without coming off rude. And it just goes to show that like who you are in community with has to give you a level of grace that you also have to give back. Because I have other friends that may be bossy. I have friends that may be passive. I may have friends who go away when they're in trouble, friends who want to be around you all the time when they're in trouble. And none of those things are bad. The thing is, they become bad when we don't accept a person's response. If I can't accept who you are, if I can't accept your uniqueness and who God has called you to be, how can I expect myself to be there to help you carry a burden? How can I expect myself to be there to help you through any trials or tribulations you may go through? Because I want to show up to you the way that I think I need to show up to you, the way I think I need to show up to you. But how is that serving another person? And realizing that this grace thing is about dying to yourself and accepting the fact that you may not ever completely understand why somebody do the things that they do or why they move the way that they move, but you just recognize the fact that I'm going to respect this person and I'm going to give them grace. And grace isn't that somebody did something bad towards you. It's just a matter of, I wish I would have got the definition down, but it's just a matter of like not taking offense on things that don't matter. Now, if I was being bossy to my friend to the point where she felt like she could never do anything or say anything around me, then that's when it's a problem. At that point, there's no more grace needed. We need to have a conversation. Like, grace is in me talking to you and letting you know something is wrong, right? But we have to get to a point where this grace thing is something we do daily, all day, every day. If I call my homegirl and she got an attitude and she snapped at me, it's like, yeah, you did say you was having a bad day, whatever. But if we can accept these different things and also be so like more compassionate and understanding towards other people, how do we expect God to do the same thing for us? Now, I only say that because, it's in the Bible. But anyways, Colossians 3:12 through 14. It says, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But all of these things put on love. Oh, but above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. So reading it, it's like, okay, in order for me to carry the burden of one another, I have to first hold the characteristics of having tender mercies towards people. So even if you deserve to be blocked, cut off, I still have to be merciful towards you. And then I still must have this character of kindness. I have to be humble, have this humility inside of me, this meekness, and have the ability to long suffer. Now, I would love to have this conversation with someone who's married, because I think long suffering looks different in marriages, especially when you're trying to walk out this particular part of the Bible. But I think long suffering is a really good word and an interesting word to put in this verse. But in order for me to even get to a point where I would consider bearing another person's sin, I have to first get to a point of holding these characteristics. And I just want to take a quick turn. Toby's coming back to the podcast, y'all. I know, he's doing his thing. There is a difference between a righteous man and a wicked man. And I think that's very important to note. The Proverbs talks about it a lot, about running away from wicked people. The righteous man falls 7 times and gets back up every single time. A lot quicker too. A wicked man is someone who actually uses the Bible to corrupt, to manipulate, to uphold his or her own laws, right? And so I say that to say, tender mercies towards someone who is wicked is not the same as tender mercies towards someone who is righteous. Run from the wicked. That is a commandment. Outside of that, keep that in mind when you're reading these scriptures and when you're trying to decipher what kind of tender mercies, who needs to stay in your life and who doesn't. But the part about if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive one another just as Christ has forgiven you. Once we start to see that we are in need of as much forgiveness as the next person, regardless if whatever they need forgiven for, if it's directed towards you or not, we need just as much of forgiveness as anybody else in the room. And once we can recognize that, I think it will help us a lot more to forgive people without, and it's levels to this, because I don't want to make it sound so shallow. When I'm speaking, I'm more so speaking about friendships, family members, stuff that's happening around you. But, it can get a lot deeper with some of the things that people have faced and suffered through. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about healthy relationships, basically. Healthy friendships, healthy relationships, and how to move past some of the offenses that we may carry. But once we can acknowledge the fact that you're God, if I can acknowledge that you're God's child, just like I am, and just as God says he will make a table in front of your enemies, he's talking about my enemies too. So when I think of it that way, it makes it easier for me to realize okay, I have to be graceful and merciful towards this person because I don't even deserve the grace and mercy that God has been giving me every day. And in order for me to even think about carrying your burdens, to even think about helping you out when you're in a hard time, to think about praying for you or etc., I have to understand that there's levels of grace that I have to give you. So if I had, like I said earlier, if I have a friend who's having a bad day and she snaps at me and I'm like, well, I don't care what you're going through. You can't talk to me like that. Making it about me instead of asking my friend, like, what's going on? At this point, I can help you carry your burdens because I've given you grace knowing that you have a problem. I don't have to focus on how I feel all the time. When we're serving one another, when we're being each other's brothers and sisters, we're dying to ourselves in order to bring other people to Christ. Jeez. Right? So if we're doing that on a daily basis, there's a level of humility we have to come down to and acknowledge the fact that that's another human being I'm talking about, and not just any other human being. That's God's child. And if I'm going to take offense so easily, how could I ever do what God has commanded me to, which is help carrying the burdens of others? So another thing that has been kind of brewing in me with all of this as well is just the simple fact that compassion has been like taking me all over the place. I can't even lie. Like, I, ever since going to 2819, the church that I go to now, and like changing some of the leaders that I listen to, some of the podcasts that I listen to, like watching some of the apologetics by Preston Perry, and even the Perry's podcast, or a few Megan Ashley, like some of the podcasters and sermons, like Flowers, Pastor Jerry Flowers, really good. Listening to these people really have shown me that there's a level of compassion in their heart that they have for people who are far away from Christ. And when I hear some of the stories that they tell, or when I'm out in the world and I see things that shows that people don't have a relationship with God, not out of judgment, but just out of common sense, like you can see it, it now breaks my heart because I understand why people are so driven to go and spread the gospel. At first, it was kind of like, I believe what I believe, you believe what you believe. We don't have to cross paths or anything like that. But now I understand, like, there's a level of, I don't know, like, just a level of compassion that I have for people who are far away from Christ. Because if it was not for Christ, I know I would not be here where I am today. If it wasn't for Christ, I know I wouldn't be on this healing process that's been expedited through his blood, through his power, and his power alone. Like, if it was not for Christ Jesus, I don't know where I would be. And so when I see people who are far away from God, who are lost, who are in this world. I mean, I am in Atlanta. I see a lot of stuff, y'all. And just seeing this on a daily basis, it breaks my heart now, but it never would have if I didn't understand how much God loves us, how much God desires to be in a relationship with us, despite what's going on in the world, despite what's going on in our personal lives. No matter how hard it gets, God loves us and he cares for us. And I know people have a bunch of questions, and I get it. I had a bunch of questions when I was agnostic, but I didn't have anywhere to turn to. I have no one to go to for real. I was, in the spiritual world. I believed in the universe. I had all of these hopes and dreams caught in something that wasn't real. They couldn't answer anything for me. And now that I have Christ, it's like I feel fulfilled. I feel powerful. I feel confident in Christ that things can get done. So I do have a level of compassion now. And so I titled this Compassion and Grace because if we can't be compassionate for people when they're hurting, if we can't empathize with people or sympathize, if we can't do those things, we might as well throw it in the trash can. Like, not literally, but it's like we have to be willing to understand, be willing to know, be willing to acknowledge other people. Like, the person that just walked past you in the street, it's not always a coincidence. Like, I don't believe in coincidences, but you never know how our worlds can tie back together. And to actually pay attention to the things going on around us. Like, one thing I try to do, and I've gotten really great at, thank God, but when I'm with somebody, especially if I'm not with them all day, when I'm with my friends, my phone is not coming out. Like, I want to know about you. When I'm in public, if I'm walking around, if I'm going to the market or something, I am not on my phone. I may call my mom at the grocery store. But if I'm out like at a coffee shop or something, I want to be present with whatever is going on around me, because you never know who you may run into, who you may bump into, where you can have a conversation with them. When I was at Kava, this was like a few months back now, but I had on First Corinthians shirts. The verse about love was on my shirt. And I was just sitting there in line. I wasn't on my phone. I was just looking, and it was a long line. And it does get weird when you first get into that, because I was just looking around, and it could look like people watching. I guess I was people watching, but not staring, just like, just there. And this girl was walking out of line, and she turned around and was like, "I love your shirt." And she was like, she just started telling me about this business, like this t-shirt business that she's trying to do, that she feel like God has led her to. Like, she just started like pouring out to me, and we had a great conversation. We ended up connecting. But because I'm learning to be more compassionate towards people, to recognize people, everybody that we walk past, the people that I work with, I don't care who you are, you're God's child. And I don't want to put myself on any kind of pedestal simply because you got a Tea with Mesha podcast, something. Y'all, I tell y'all every week, go learn the Bible for yourself, because I'm just telling you where I am. This is my journey in my life and what I think God is exposing to me. But I am not, not one of those ones that, like, I'm not a disciple. Just not that. So I kind of want to talk about Galatians 6:1-3. Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespasses, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. So reading this verse as well has helped me see that we are required to hold one another accountable. And the only way we can hold one another accountable is to have grace, y'all, to have grace. If I can recognize that you are righteous, but you have fallen short, I can still give grace to you and hold you accountable. Like, I don't hate you because, I'm trying to think of a sin. I don't hate you because you lied on me. Like, I'm going to give you grace because maybe you lied because you were afraid. Maybe you lied because you were feeling envious, or I don't know. Like, maybe you lied. You had a really good reason for why you lied. Not a good reason, but you had a valid reason for why you lied as far as your current emotions, the things that you were dealing with. But I'm still going to have to hold that person accountable, like, regardless of what your offense was to me. God calls us away from lying. He tells us to be truthful. He tells us that there's power in the tongue. Like, let me bring you Bible instead of bringing you how I feel. And I'm not saying our feelings don't matter. That's what I'm saying. But there has to be a shift in our focus when it comes to us serving one another. Like, literally getting ahead of things, trying to mend things with one another, but caring enough to do it. I think now we live in a society where everybody is just selfish. And not everybody, but a good chunk of people have started to create this selfish pattern in their lives. Like, they want all of the attention, they want all of the support, but they don't want to give no support to nobody. Like, it's this cycle of narcissism. It's just this big thing, self-love, just all these different things. And I'm not saying that self-love is wrong, but what is your boundary with that? Are you cutting people off who actually need to be in your life because you think that you're protecting yourself? We need to be dying to ourselves. We need to be walking like Christ. We need to be living a life that God will smile upon, not living a life that the world agrees with, or that your favorite artist agrees with, or whoever. Like, we have to walk the way that God calls us to, and not to get so caught up in who we are, because we all have this level of main character syndrome. It doesn't matter how bad. I'm trying to be very selective, because the last thing I want people to do is to be okay with abuse. That's not what I'm saying. Not at all. Going back to righteous and healthy relationships, we got a righteous man and a wicked man. But it's just not okay for us to get so caught up in ourselves that we start protecting ourselves and not allowing God to protect us. Because if I'm trying to protect myself, I got a walls, I'm a whole onion. It's going to take layers to peel me off, like all this different junk. Instead of being like, I'm going to walk in my truth, I'm going to spirit my testimony, and I'm going to rely on the armor that God has given me, not the armor that I've made up in my head. Because if I put my armor to the test, me having my walls up, I would never be vulnerable. I would never share my testimonies because I don't trust people. Like, I would just have all these walls up, and then I could never be a person who can spread the glory of God through my testimony because I don't trust you. Or if somebody has broken my trust before, and I don't trust nobody, that's selfish. That's just what it is, and it's not what God calls us to be. But I feel like I'm rambling now. But it's just so important. Like, we have to understand that we are called to love one another on a way deeper level than most of us have been doing our entire lives. Like, it's relationships are hard. They require you dying to yourselves. It requires you sacrificing things. It requires you to do a lot of compromising. And it's okay. Like, that is not a bad thing. Relationships aren't going to be just like a piece of cake. Friendships, like, or romantic, like any relationship, they're not going to be a piece of cake. It just takes discernment, and it takes a lot of praying with God. It takes a lot of conversations with your friends, but you have to be honest with one another. You have to be real. Like, one day I text my friend, she told me like she wasn't gonna be able to do something one day, and I sent a message, and I was like, well, like, be sure that you say something. And then I came back and was like, I apologize if they came back wrong, because we were texting. I was like, I apologize if this came off wrong. Like, that definitely wasn't my intention, but I do apologize. And she responded and was like, yeah, because it did sound nasty. Like, you kind of like said it kind of funky. And I was like, I figured it was taken that way. So I apologize, because I definitely could have used better words, but because I was busy, I was just typing. But I thank God that she gave me grace to not respond in a negative way, like, back to me. Like, she could have easily been like, I said what I said, but she was just like, all right, okay, like, whatever. Like, she just kind of brushed it off. But that's grace. And I thank God that I had the mind in the moment to be like, sorry if that came off wrong. Like, we're texting, like, I'm pretty sure they could have been read any kind of way, so I want to go ahead and clarify. That's not it. But be mindful of your friendships, be mindful of your relationships, and understand, like, if somebody needs to skip you online, let them. Like, I don't know, just let them. It's not going to kill you. We have to stop operating as if things are going to kill us if we're being selfless. If anything, it's making you stronger. It's making God happier. Like, we're making him proud. Well, thank God, he proud of us anyway. But it's just, we have to just stop being so selfish and actually pray to God and ask him to reveal us what areas are we selfish in, what areas do we need to improve on. Like, I got to get better with just letting people over for the sake of it. Let's get over it. While I'm driving, I hate letting people get in front of me, because I don't know if you're going to go with the traffic or if you're going to start driving slow. Then that's going to make me mad. But I got to start letting people over. So whatever it may be for you that you need to start being more aware of, that you need to start working on grace with, I pray that God gives you the revelation that you need so that you can do that. Outside of that, I hope y'all have a great week. I hope y'all have a happy 4th of July, if you celebrate it or not. If you do, definitely be safe. Be careful with the fireworks. Be careful out there in them streets. If you don't celebrate it, I hope you got some great noise canceling headphones or the little earplugs, because depending on where you live, it's going to get crazy. But y'all, have a great week. Be safe if you're traveling. I'll be praying for you all. I love y'all. Bye.